Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. Building tomorrow's best leaders, today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, Trevor, let's finish. Josh, Coach Carl.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Carl here, and welcome to episode 342 of the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. It really is time to start your own leadership revolution. And today's guest will help you in your journey. ZoëRouth is one of Australia's leading experts on people stuff in leadership. She helps leaders and teams overcome silos and turf wars to work better together. She's worked with individuals and teams internationally and in Australia since 1987. From the wild rivers of northern Ontario to the remote regions of Australia, Zoe has spent the last 30 years showing teams struggling with office politics and silos how to work better together. Zoe is the author of 4 books: Composure, How Centered Leaders Make the Biggest Impact; Moments, Leadership When It Matters Most; Loyalty, Stop Unwanted Staff Turnover, Boost Engagement and Build Lifelong Advocates; and her 4th book, People Stuff, Beyond Personality Problems, has won numerous awards. With People Stuff, it was stated that we're facing a crisis of trust in leadership with a backdrop of volatility, uncertainty and exponential change. Leaders have a lot to contend with. It makes the usual people management issues difficult to contend with. People Stuff is a leader's guide to seeing more to lead better. Zoe is an outdoor adventurist and enjoys telemark skiing, has run 6 marathons, survived to cancer, is a one-time belly dancer, and loves hiking in the high country. Zoe shares her experiences and insights in some really key areas during our conversation, especially around protecting your own leadership confidence, building trust by role modeling the behaviors needed, and shared some real profound commentary around the concept of elderdom. This is a podcast not to miss. And after hearing from Think and Grow Business, please welcome ZoëRouth.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, the podcast for the leaders and the entrepreneurs of today. Please welcome ZoëRouth.
Hey, Tony. Great to be here.
And it's great to be with you, Zoe. You're in Canberra and you're currently under lockdown, so I hope that I'm giving this interview gives you a little bit of a spark during the course of the day. So share with our listeners the ZoëRouth story.
I'll go the highlights. The ZoëRouth story. So the first thing you're going to notice, depending where you're listening from, I have an accent. I am a Canadian-Australian, and I arrived in Australia way back in 1996, and I'm celebrating 25 years in Australia in September, which I cannot believe it's happened. That seems like just yesterday I was a fresh-faced 20-something-year-old arriving in this country. And what brought me out here was the outdoors. I had a job lined up with Outward Bound, which does personal and leadership development in the outdoors. And I was set for 13 months, a 13-month contract, which seemed like forever. When I first signed up, I'm like, oh, that's a really long time to be away from home. Well, 25 years later, something shifted. And so the catalyst to come out here was really a blending of a couple of different worlds. So my background in Canada was leading outdoor experiential canoe trips with the YMYWCA. So every summer I would get to lead these fantastic canoe trips across Northwest Ontario with young people focusing on personal and leadership development. And then I would go back to studying at university, and that was a completely different universe. And I studied English literature. And at some point, I had to make a choice. Am I going to continue down the academic route and do my master's, etc., or was I going to pursue this passion for the outdoors? Well, I picked the outdoors, and I think it was a bit of an epiphany. I was like, studied so many novels, and I was like, I'm sick of reading about people having a life. I'm going to go and have a life of my own. And I picked Australia because you could do outdoor experiential ed year round. Like the climate's pretty favorable for outdoor activities. Whereas in Canada, you need to have summer skills as well as winter skills. And I didn't have the winter skills. So off I trotted with my 13-month contract in hand and landed here.
Excellent. And you've been here ever since?
Yeah, ever since. Yeah, that's right. So somehow I ended up having my visa extended, became a citizen. I started my own company in 2002 while I was working at Outward Bound. I discovered a different modality for personal development called coaching. And at the time, it was a brand new industry. And I'm like, wow, this is such a powerful way to work with people. And so I want to do that. And then I discovered, becoming a business owner is very different to actually delivering the work. And that was a whole other mountain to climb, that's for sure.
Congratulations that still in the game, because I know so many people who are skilled coaches just haven't been able to get that business concept, that business model up and off the ground. So it can be an incredible challenge. So congratulations on that. Now, Zoe, you've written a book. It's called People Stuff Beyond Personality Problems. And I think there's another little byline there, Advanced Model for Leadership or
Advanced
something.
Handbook. Yeah.
That's it, Advanced Handbook for Leadership. Tell me, what compelled you to dive in and write a book called People Stuff?
Well, it's all the work that I do with leaders. So I work a lot one-on-one with CEOs, and then I also work with their executive teams. And whenever I ask them, like, what's your biggest challenge right now? Invariably, it wasn't what I thought it might be, which was, we need to work on our strategy or we need to problem solve our finances. It always reverted to people dynamics. And in fact, many of them use that terminology. It's the people stuff. That's the hardest thing about my work for sure. And every time I did a coaching session or every time I ran a masterclass or a workshop with leaders, it always came down to like, how do we get them to listen? How do we get people to be accountable? And I just started really digging into what are the root causes of some of these issues. And my research led me to look at the patterns underneath the surface. And thus, people stuff emerged.
Isn't it interesting? But I mean, in so many ways, people sort of almost discount the concept of leadership and developing their so-called soft skills. Yet when every time my experience mirrors yours, whenever we talk to leaders, invariably that people stuff, those issues that we face working with people invariably come up. In fact, I know a lot of tradespeople who've built a business, developed a team, and then ultimately have shrunk back because to them it was just easier working for themselves and not having to deal with the people stuff. So I just find that incredibly compelling. So for those people that are thinking that it's easier just to keep your business small and not have to worry about the people stuff, what sort of advice, tips and strategies could you provide them right now?
For those who want to keep their business small, keep it small. You save yourself some headaches. And I agree with that. Like twice I've stepped away from big jobs where I managed a lot of people because I felt like my fingers and toes have been burnt in the fire of the people dynamics. And it is quite scorching. So I totally get it, why people back away from scaling up their teams. And at the same time, it's so limiting. Because there's only so much you can do as an individual or a smaller team. You can't actually deliver on your bigger vision. You can't have a bigger ripple effect if you're keeping yourself small. So if you are called to make a bigger difference, to make a bigger impact, and you want to serve more people, then it's time to step up and to help elevate others. And I think there's three things that leaders need to do if they're going to move away from just achieving results to amplifying the outcomes of others. And there's three main things. One is to reduce friction. So that's looking at all the systems you have in your business and where is there friction between you and others and between everybody else. So that's the primary thing. The second thing is to build capability. And it's interesting that you say that a lot of people discount soft skills or people skills. I find the reverse, actually. I think there's much more of an appetite for that because, especially now in the pandemic, it's all you've got. When you're staring through screens all day, your ability to facilitate is the main thing. So building capability is the next prime primary responsibility. And the third one is to maximize your own energy. Because if you're going to be a steward for this growing team, then you need to make sure that you are on fire all the time. You can't afford to have yourself out of the picture just at this stage, especially if you're starting to leverage up. Yep. So that's sort of the starting point. And I would say, people can be the biggest pain in your butt, but they can also be your biggest joy. There's nothing better than working with a highly connected team of professionals who are so excited about the work that they're doing. They're enthusiastic, they've got gumption, they've got initiative, and together you accomplish amazing things. Like that is joyous. So hang out for that, even when you got the things that are prickling at you.
I'm reminded as you were speaking of a conversation I heard John Maxwell talk about once, where one stage during his career he sort of backed away from his people, and because of one person that he placed a lot of trust in had let him down. So all of a sudden he said, well, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm not going to place a lot of trust into people. One of his mentors actually said, well, John, that's okay, because your people won't hurt you. But guess what? They're not in a position to help you either. And it was really part of that awakening call that he sort of had in relation to that. So the same with businesses. If you keep your business small and work purely by yourself or with a very limited team, that's okay. The pain is not going to hurt you. But as you were just saying, the position to have your team actually help you grow your business and really enhance your purpose or your calling only comes through the development and the capability and the responsibility of accepting that responsibility of being a leader. So in one of the blurbs in and around your book, you talk about a crisis of trust in leadership. So, and this is absolutely fascinating to me, especially with what we're going through at the moment. So the blurb says we're facing a crisis of trust in leadership with a backdrop of volatility, uncertainty, and exponential change. Leaders have a lot to contend with. Now, your book came out last year. So talk me through, because statistically we keep seeing a lot of mistrust of leaders, some distrust of leaders. There's rising cynicism in the world. So talk me through what you're seeing and how leaders can potentially deal with this crisis of trust.
Well, what I'm seeing is this similar research to you. Is I love looking at the Edelman Trust Barometer, and one of the things I noticed last year, it came out in February before the pandemic really hit, and it was startling, their assessment of trust in leadership in Australia. So they looked at the four main areas, media, government, not-for-profit sector, and corporate. And they asked Australians, who do you trust? And they had two factors for trust, the competency and ethics. So they looked at that, those two things. And none of the four major stakeholders achieved both ethics and capability in the eyes of the Australian public. Wow. So not-for-profits were seen as ethical but not competent. Corporations were seen as competent but not ethical. And neither ethical nor competent government and media. And so, wow, for our four major institutions, that's pretty scary. And I think it's a bit of a bum rap, and I think it's the very public downfall of major corporations or doing the wrong thing. And there's so many different examples of that. Rio Tinto blowing up 46,000-year-old rock shelters over in WA. That's just horrendous, and that's just one example. We've got corporate scandal after corporate scandal, and it just seems you just have to turn the page and whoa, there's another one, somebody doing the wrong thing. And I think that sort of we can all, as leaders, we can all be tainted with the same brush, or tarred with the same brush, tainted with the same, I'm not sure what the expression is.
Both work for me.
Yeah. So in that context, how do we actually build trust with the people around us? And I think there's actually a lot of really excellent leaders doing the right thing, and they're working hard, and they're humble, and they are self-conscious and self-aware about the way that they can reach out to people. So in terms of what leaders can do to swim against this tide of cynicism, I think there's some fundamentals in there for sure. And I like to think about using an archetype. I talk about archetypes and people stuff as well. And I use the archetype of the elder. Now, the elder goes across many different cultures. There's the Aboriginal elder here. Our First Nations people here have elderdom is a really important part of their culture, where they are stewards of the culture and the main educators. There's elders in the First Nations people of Canada and North America as well. The idea about the elder is about being wise and compassionate. So wise meaning you've got the most sensible way of looking at things and making smart decisions. And compassion being that you are taking the most sensitive and heartfelt way to dealing with situations. You need a balance of both. So the elder balances both those things. And in order to do that, there's three things that are like an antidote to the traps of power and status and authority, which is what people rail against. And those three things that are the antidote are curiosity. So when we are absolutely curious about other people, about the situation, it keeps us from jumping to conclusions and making assumptions and making bad decisions. So curiosity is really important there. Humility is the next piece. And because if we just remember that there's always something to know, that more brains are better than one, and any other cliche you want to throw at it, then it also prevents us from, again, stumbling in the dark and making the wrong decision. And the third one is care, is that we actually care about each other. We care about others. We care about the planet. We care about our purpose. So when we are outward facing, we're focused on other people. It prevents us from falling into that trap of power, which is the rise of hubris and self-absorption. I was listening to an intro to another book on WeWork, Adam Newman's WeWork. Story, and it's a classic example of the rise to power and the fall from grace is brought about by megalomania and the traps of power. So none of us want to be doing that, that's for sure.
So curiosity, humility, and care are genuine traits that you would really want to see within leaders of any organization. And you know, looking at that curiosity thing, that ability to be genuinely curious and not believe that you're a know-it-all and that you have all the answers. And when I've seen leaders that have been genuinely curious and asking great questions of their team and their people, you generally come up with a much better outcome than what, or a strategy or a plan than what you can tend to see if a leader just says, I know what to do and just follow me. So I would tend to agree with that. Humility, care, definitely care. I love the concept that leaders should care about their team and their people. And at the moment here in Australia, they're talking a little bit about Justin Langer, the Australian cricket coach, and how intense that he can be and how all of a sudden there's a lot of players apparently that are offside with him. But I've never met an intense coach yet or an intense leader that hasn't actually genuinely cared about their team. You know, we see it a lot in the sporting world. Some of those hardest coaches are also the ones that show the greatest amount of genuine care for their team. So to build trust, are they the three key traits that you're looking at, Zoe? Curiosity, humility, and care?
I don't think it's traits alone. I mean, just because you're a decent human doesn't necessarily make you trustworthy. I think it's what you actually do. When it comes to building trust in teams, I always tell people don't focus on building trust because trust is a byproduct. It's not something that you can say, right, we're going to do these trust building activities. It's like, no, you're not. You're going to do some activities. Maybe trust comes, but maybe it doesn't. And there's a couple of key principles with building trust in teams, and one of them is you got to have repeated positive experiences. If you keep having negative experience or somebody kicks you around a little, you're just not going to feel open to trust. There's five things really. You need to have, for a trust to be built in a team, you need to have a clear purpose, clear results, so that they frame what you're actually doing. So you have got a container of activity that sets the team up for success. And then the three things that you do in the middle of that. So purpose and results are like two wheels of a bicycle. Purpose is the lead wheel and results is the trailing one. And the gears in the middle. First of all, it's structure in the team. And you got to have that super clear. And I think this is often where you run into trouble with teams is people don't know how decisions are made. They don't know who to delegate to or who should be delegating to them. And so you get all these like stepping on toes sort of things. So structure needs to be clearly identified and so on. Strengths, each individual's strengths need to be honed and leveraged and developed, because that really builds engagement and participation, and people feel excited to show up and do the work. And the last thing is creating an environment where people feel safe to speak up. And if you don't have that piece, then, oh my goodness, you're never going to get anywhere close to trust. I was just speaking to a leader today, and she was saying they have two teams that were smashed together, and they have these two different teams had totally different sets of values. And so when they first came together, there was like this collision of the, it's like the pecking order. When you put new chickens in a chicken pen, you have, everybody pecks at each other until they sort out who's who at the zoo. So she had that bit of an experience. And until they worked out what's the common set of values, what's the common purpose between each other, and they worked out how to make decisions and who has carriage of what, then things started to get a little bit easier. I saw that in my own team. So I had a brand new team at the start of the pandemic, and a team of 3. You'd think that we could survive, we would skip over and not have tension. Well, no. We're humans. It turns out same team dynamics happen. So we had to get very clear about who authorizes what and who says what and how we do that, and sensitivities and how people speak to each other and all that kind of normal stuff. That's the groundwork for building trusting teams. And your traits are just the fundamentals. They're not the actual things that deliver it for you.
So trust is built on behaviors, and I like that concept of structure in the team, because I'm reading that includes things like role clarity and team purpose and whatnot as well. So clear purpose, clear results, structure, strengths, and safety. So I'm seeing that there's some real clarity there. One of the interesting things I've had in the past, and probably more so when I was actually working in the corporate space, is that I used to have leaders just come to me and say, so how do I build trust? I'm a disciple of the John Maxwell leadership philosophy. And one of the things that I've always said to them first up is, well, to have trust within your team, to build trust within the team, the first thing you need to be doing is to be trustworthy. And you can only be trustworthy through your actions and your behaviors. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to build trust. So it's almost like they want to get the end result without having to put in the hard work. And, sometimes it can be, you talked about bringing two teams together. It can be hard work to build trust between people that are in an uncomfortable place and not quite feeling the love or the trust within the team. So,
especially if you have assumptions about those other people. They were seen as the enemy, that they were counterproductive to what they were trying to do. And I've seen this in other organizations that have been smashed together. A few years ago, I did some work at Border Force, and that was when they brought in immigration and border control together into one unit. And philosophically and purpose-wise, they were actually had very different intents. One was a very military-like organization, so high hierarchy and discipline and uniforms. The other one was not. It was about immigration and welcoming people in. And it seemed like they were working against each other in some ways in terms of philosophies.
On different ends of the spectrum,
Yeah. And so that was really difficult for people to try and embed. And I think this culture merge is, I think that's a myth. I think it's, when you're bringing two organizations together, two teams together, there's always going to be one that kind of supersedes the other. There is not a key blending. I think you have to work really hard to integrate two different sets of values. And that third way takes a lot of effort.
Is there hope for leaders and trust in the world today? And I know that you're expressing that there is, and a lot of people are actually starting to think more about the development of soft skills and whatnot, and I appreciate that, because that gives me a little bit of hope. But talk me through, so is there hope that we can genuinely start to arrest some of this mistrust or cynicism that we see within the world through better leadership?
Absolutely, I think there's hope. I would never give up on hope, that's for sure. I think it's about looking for, and this is where the media does a great disservice because, scandal makes news. Here's someone who's doing a great job, does not make news.
Yeah.
And so I think when we go looking for good examples, we find them. And that's one of the missions I have in my podcast too, is highlighting good examples of people doing good things as leaders. And that gives people examples to follow and shows that it is possible to do it, and real humans carrying the can of leadership and bringing their teams along for the ride. So I think absolutely there's hope, and that's one way that we can help to unearth it. And I think as individuals, we can also call out great leadership and celebrate it and to highlight it to others. I think that's really, really important. I wrote a post recently on LinkedIn called a love letter to leaders. And it was a celebration of all the amazing things that I've seen leaders doing and encouraging people to, hey, you might be doing it tough, but probably the person making the decisions in lockdown or through the pandemic has got it pretty tough because they've had to make some tough calls. How about you send some love up their way to help them deal with what's going on? And often we don't think about that, the burden of responsibility that leaders have to contend with. I mean, a lot of leaders have had to stand people down, close businesses, deliver bad news. It's pretty horrendous what they've had to contend with. And then some of the people they're laying off, they know have personal challenges. I've got leaders whose partners have had heart attacks. I've had leaders whose children are in hospital having to contend with all that. So there's a lot going on for folks. And I think if we channel a little bit more of the elder archetype, the wisdom and compassion piece, then that's your calling card for hope.
Absolutely. That's a really good way to sort of, I suppose, sum up that whole concept, because it's so easy to be standing on the sidelines throwing pot shots at people that are in the game, making the decisions as they go, and they're not making the decisions based around how can I personally affect Tony or Zoe as much as I possibly can. They're making the decisions that they believe are based on great advice and trying to come through this. So that concept of leaders being a dealer of hope is just really resonating with me at the moment. And it's just something that, when I talk to all of my coaching clients in relation to, it's got to be part of their way forward, because their people are uncertain. Their people, last year we thought it was for 2 weeks, then maybe 3 months, and then we'd be out of it by September. And here we are, September 21, and we're still going through it. So, with that comes a huge level of fatigue and anxiety that, and our leaders are the ones that have to be calmly navigating their way through to provide some level of hope that, one day we will get through this together. So
we need to protect our confidence and our courage as leaders for that exact reason. It's exhausting to have to keep showing up every day going, I don't know when it's going to end. And I think one of the ways to do that is, and I take a leaf out of Dan Sullivan's playbook here, is to look backwards and to see how far have we come, as opposed to how far have we got to go, which at the moment, we're speaking in pandemic terms, is completely unknown. How far have we come? And I think the focus on vaccination rates, I think, is probably a good strategy. It's like, well, a year ago we didn't have a vaccine. Now we have a vaccine, and we're accelerating protection for people around that. So that's an example of where we can focus our lens to try and build up confidence and courage, is how far have we come? And then also from, aside from the big picture pandemic stuff, is what are our daily activities? What have we done in the last week that is supporting our goals? And what traction have we made in the last week? And why is this meaningful to us? So coming back and putting the lens on the very specific nitty gritty of our day-to-day activity and its meaning is super important. And so protecting our own confidence and our own energy as leaders is mission number one.
I love the way you said that, actually, because the minute you said that, protecting confidence, your own confidence, I know that there would be people that would just be, yes, because once again, we probably got a plethora of leaders out there that feel that they're giving, and they're not necessarily potentially doing enough to protect themselves and to get that concept of self-care and mindfulness or whatever modology that people use, but that protection of themselves and their energy is vital. So in respect to your career, Zoe, who's inspired you through your journey?
Oh, some wonderful leaders. I remember Kelly Picken. She was she's this amazing, tall redhead with this huge mane of flaming red hair.
Yeah.
And she was head of the out tripping program at summer camp when I first did my own personal 6-week canoe trip as a kid. And
Yeah.
she was like this Amazon-like woman. And she was the one who hired me for a camp. And I remember that summer I was 15. I must have been a little bit older. 16 going on 17. And that summer I had a choice, will I work in the city as a waitress or a bus girl or whatever, earn some money, buy a car? That was choice number one. Choice number two, and somebody nudged me to it, said, you should apply to work at camp. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about this. And she interviewed me. And she asked me questions about what kinds of things I would do with kids, and I really didn't know. But she kind of drew it out of me.
Yeah.
And she said, I think you would be a great contributor. I think you'd be a great summer camp counselor. I want to give you a job. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like more fun than bussing tables.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that kicked me into my journey of working in the outdoors with humans, which has lasted me 30 odd years, So she was one of the leaders I admired the most. That was a very personal leadership role. And it wasn't that she gave me a chance. It was that she was so passionate about the work and she was so dedicated to the staff. Like, she really showed that she loved her people. And I felt loved and held and seen by her. And that
Wow.
really stuck with me. And it's something that I've really admired and tried to emulate in all of my leadership roles. So she's definitely one of them. So that's like the personal scale. I think on the grander scale, Angela Merkel, I think, is a stalwart of a leader, and she's had an extraordinary career and maintained such composure and such presence through so many difficult challenges. So I admire her absolutely.
Excellent.
I could probably start listing off a whole bunch, but I'll stop there.
Kelly Picken is just often when we've had that inspiration during our career, the name's always there. The visualization of that leader is always there. Once again, it's just part of our journey that we've been inspired by people along the way, and I really love highlighting it when people can say it was this person, and it just showcases to the leaders that are listening that there will be people that will encourage you, that will challenge you, that will stretch you, and that as you journey through, you will always remember the input that they've had, which I think is just such a positive. So,
and another thing with that, Tony, is not only that we will receive that, but we can do that for other people.
Other people, yeah.
We can be the one, and it's often just a throwaway line to us, but our sense of like, hey, Tony, I think you would be really good at, X, Y, and Z. And we just say it as a casual observation, but for you receiving that, it plants a seed and it grows into this enormous oak tree of an opportunity and a new direction for you. And I think as leaders, we can do that for people. If we call out what we see as their potential in others, or what we see what their gifts are, what we can see what they're doing is so positive. Like, if we have that as a primary responsibility, is to notice and to call out the good stuff, I think we plant those seeds everywhere, and that's a bastion of strength that we can lend to other people. That's so easy to do.
Once again, I'm going to sort of pick up on that, because the Chick-fil-A organization in America, that Dan, I've forgotten the gentleman's last name, so I'll throw it in the show notes, but Dan calls himself the CEO, which stands for Chief Encouragement Officer, and he was shared at one of the conferences that I went to. He said, so who needs encouragement? He said the simple test is you just do a pulse check, and if they've got a pulse, they're in need of encouragement. So I just thought it was one of the most simple ways that you can really think about what is my role as a leader, and to be, a dealer in hope, but also that Chief Encouragement Officer. It just has stayed with me ever since. So during our career, we often have our peaks and we'll often have our troughs. So tell me about your relationship with failure.
Yeah, I have quite an intimate relationship with failure. And, we talked about, I started my business in 2002, and you're like, oh, congratulations, it's still going. I'm like, yeah, but what we didn't talk about was like the desperate hell I went through in order to get to where I am now.
Yeah.
And I started off, I did it part-time while I was still working at Outward Bound. And then when I took then I went full-time into it in 2005. I went hell for leather. I'm going to make this business work. And I got really sick. I got cancer. Oh. So cancer went, whoop, no, you're going to have a little pause in your business. And I dealt with cancer, threw my confidence off, threw my health off, threw my energy off, ended up taking a different job after I came back from treatment. Yeah. And I felt like such a failure then. I'm like, I'm a failed entrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a business person. And I was just so beating myself up, which is what you totally don't need after you've gone through cancer. In any case, I went to this job. It turned out to be a really excellent thing for me because it rebooted my confidence. I learned a whole bunch of new skills and new insights and made new networks. It was like an amazing opportunity. But for such a long time while I started that, I'm like, every day I'm like, I'm a failure. Then I got over myself and had another crack at it. And that was 7 years ago, I think, 2014. Yeah. And really found the business model that worked well. But I think the devastating part was first of all, when I got cancer and just everything fell apart. And then what I forgot to say is that before I took that job, there was a 3-year period. I've already blocked it out of my mind. It was so hard. Yeah. And that 3-year period was like, I finished getting cancer treatment and I tried to reboot my business and it still wasn't working. And I was getting more and more in debt and more depressed and more isolated and felt even more like a failure. And then it was my friend who said, come and work over here. I think you'll be good at this. I'm like, okay, I still feel like a failure. So yeah, I had this idea that I really needed to smash through, and if I couldn't get it right, then I was obviously not equipped to deal with it. Yeah. So that's probably like the primary example of dealing with failure. And then now I've gotten much more adept at it, test something, see how it goes. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, okay. If there was crickets chirping on that particular initiative, move on, learn. Yeah. So a much healthier attitude towards it now, sort of an experimentalist as opposed to win at all costs or win or lose kind of mentality.
Fascinating. You've kicked cancer's butt and saw yourself as a failure because of one aspect of your life. So once again, there's a really good, strong message out there. And as we learn, as we come through these challenges that are thrown our way, and they continue to get thrown our way, it's about understanding why something didn't work and what we can do to make it better. So I, once again, I'm going to say congratulations. What a journey, and how many little ticks along the way that you've been able to work through. So, and it's great that the mindset sort of shifted a little in your journey as well. So,
Tony, one of the things I'm working with, just before you go to your next question, around that, which I think is really useful, and is to lower the bar as a principle. And I don't mean lower your standards. I mean, lower the bar for your rules for happiness. And I first learned about this through Tony Robbins like 20 years ago. And he's like, what do you need to have in place in order for you to feel happy? And one guy, he gave an example, had like, I need 9% body fat. I need to be making this amount of money. Like, he had all these rules that he needed to have in order to feel happy. And he was miserable. And he had all this success, but was still miserable. And then this other person is like, always happy. Like, what are your rules? He's like, if every day I wake up and I'm still breathing, it's a good day. Wow. And I was like, yeah, if we lower the bar for happiness, then we get to experience it more. And that unleashes so much creative possibility in us. And so I've always been a hard judge of myself, and it's something that I've been working on for 20 odd plus years to try and reel back and to actually take delight in smaller things. And I'm heaps better at it, but still a work in progress.
Great advice. So what are the traits that you would believe that leaders of today or today's leaders need to have to be successful?
Go back and lean on the wisdom and compassion piece of an elder. So that's all about perspective. Yeah. And so wisdom and compassion are two things that we need to always elevate. So can we be sensitive and sensible in all of our decisions? And how do we do that? Is that we need to develop our perspective, how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we see the world. And we want to look far, deep, and wide. And I think that's that, if anything, perspective is the gateway to success as a leader. Absolutely, we need to develop that much better.
Excellent. What's the vision for you moving forward?
The vision for me is twofold. So I have a CEO community called Amplifiers that I'm hoping to get out into the greater world and expand beyond. We've got a local chapter here in Canberra, and the idea was to have chapters around Australia before the pandemic hit. So what we did is maintain the Canberra chapter because we only had a short lockdown last year. So we were able to meet, and then we have an online platform. So I want to grow the Amplifiers community to amplify the development of leaders. So I believe in better leaders, better world. So that's my mission in that particular area. The second part of the future for me is about becoming a full-time author. So I've got my 5th book project on the go, and it's a fiction book this time. So I'm writing a novel for the first time. Yeah. So it's a different avenue to get some different leadership messages out there in a different format. So those are the two pictures: amplify amplifiers and to become a full-time writer.
Excellent. So out of everything that you've accomplished over the last couple of years, what are you most proud of?
I'm proud of People Stuff, actually. It's my 4th book, and it won Book of the Year last year, so which was so unexpected. It's probably one of the only times in my life I have actually been speechless. And I'm not short of a word. And when this flashed up on the screen, I couldn't speak. All I could get out was, Rob, which is calling out to my husband. I couldn't even tell him. I'm like, I had to point at the screen saying, which showed that I'd won a Book of the Year. And he's like, wow. What are you upset about? Because I was bawling at this point. He was like, it's not the Pulitzer or anything. I'm like, so he's a good sobering mechanism for me, not to get overwhelmed by stuff. So I'm pretty proud of that. I'm also really proud of the leaders I work with because they're doing it tough in the trenches, and they're the ones who are making huge, courageous leaps all the time with the work that they do. I'm proud every time they run an experiment, or they try a new way of doing things, or they step up and back themselves and back their teams. Like, I'm also really, really proud of that. And I'm also really proud that I stuck with the entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. That's coming back to my own personal success now, is that I started in 2002. I almost died from cancer, came back and trudged my way through that, dug myself out of an emotional mindset hole, and have come good. Like, I'm really pleased with the way that my business is running now and the lifestyle that it accords me. And I'm just so grateful every day for that. That was 3 things.
Excellent. So this is your opportunity to jump on a soapbox. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I probably should have asked you, Zoe?
I guess the question you said, why would people want to work with you as opposed to any other leadership expert, is always a useful one. Yeah. And my clients would say, because I'm down to earth, I'm straightforward, I don't hold anything back, and I love to have fun, and that I try and put things as clearly as possible in simple to understand language. Yeah. And one of my key abilities is to be able to make the complex simple and accessible. And also, I love the great outdoors. So I tend to attract leaders who love the great outdoors as well. And sometimes I offer programs that go in the great outdoors, like I'm considering for next year. Pandemic pending, we can gather and have a deep, powerful experience under the stars. That would be awesome.
Excellent. So last question, how can people connect with you, Zoe?
Thanks for asking, Tony. There's my website, which is ZoëRouth.com, ZoERouth. It's like mouth with an R. There's LinkedIn. I'm often on LinkedIn. There's the other social media platforms as well. And probably you can tune in and listen to my podcast show, which is the ZoëRouth Leadership Podcast.
Excellent. No worries. And those links, of course, will be in the show notes. Zoe, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for investing in today's leaders.
Oh, thank you, Tony, for hosting this show, inviting me on. It's been a pleasure to be here with you.
And now, it's time for Tony's 2 cents.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Zoe. There was so much gold that was mined during the discussion. Now, I really love the concept of protecting your own leadership confidence. Now, many times we get caught up as a servant leader that our people are being looked after. And often that can lead to neglect for ourselves. But as a leader also, not to allow negative thoughts to dent our confidence, not allowing our energy to be drained, not allowing our results to impact us negatively, and becoming less effective for ourselves and our team's development and engagement. We should never lose sight of the role that we play in the careers and aspirations of our team, but we should also never lose sight of the role that we play for ourselves. Leaders are dealers in hope. And as Dan Cathy from Chick-fil-A says, leaders should be the chief encouragement officer for their team. But we also need to be the CEO, the chief encouragement officer for ourselves. Can you do that? Again, a big thanks to Zoe Routh for her investment in Today's Leaders, and as usual, her details are in the show notes. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. Today's Leader, building tomorrow's best leaders today, being the best leader today to forge greater success tomorrow. The mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. It really is your very own leadership revolution. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Masterminds. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call right from the homepage at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. You are standing stronger, braver and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.